You want me to cook for your precious executives after 15 years of treating me like your personal servant?" The words hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. My mother's face turned crimson as 25 VIP guests, including the CEO of Pinnacle Corporation, watched our family drama unfold in real time. What they didn't know was that I wasn't the family failure they thought I was. I was about to become their worst nightmare. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels, and stick around until the end, because what happens next will blow your mind. My name is Emma Carter, and for 15 years I lived as a ghost in my own family's mansion. Not the romantic, mysterious kind of ghost you read about in novels, the invisible, exploited kind that everyone pretends doesn't exist until they need something done. Christmas Eve 2023. The night everything changed forever. I was standing in the marble foyer of my parents' Westchester estate, designer luggage in one hand, airline confirmation on my phone in the other, watching my mother's perfectly Botoxed face contort into something that could have been featured in a horror movie. "Emma Catherine Carter, you put that suitcase down right now." Margaret Carter's voice could shatter crystal, and tonight it was operating at full capacity. "I don't care about your little vacation plans. We have 25 very important people coming for dinner tomorrow, and you will be in that kitchen cooking." 25 people, 24 hours notice on Christmas Day. I'd heard this song before, sung it, lived it, breathed it for more years than I cared to count. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, I had somewhere else to be, somewhere that mattered more than playing Cinderella for the 1,000th time. "No." The word came out calm, steady, final. My mother blinked like I'd spoken in ancient Sanskrit. "Excuse me." I said, "No, Mother, find another caterer." The silence that followed was the kind you experience right before a tornado hits, eerily quiet, charged with electricity, and absolutely terrifying if you knew what was coming. My father, Robert Carter, looked up from his Wall Street Journal for the first time in what might have been weeks. His reading glasses, perched on the end of his nose, salt and pepper hair, perfectly styled despite the late hour. "Emma, your mother has already told these people that you'll be handling the dinner. Some of them are flying in from other states." Of course they had. Of course they'd promised my services without consulting me, the way you might promise someone could borrow your car without asking the car's permission. "Then you'd better call them back and tell them plans have changed," I said, adjusting my grip on my luggage. "I have a flight to catch." Grace, my 28-year-old sister, emerged from the living room like a perfectly groomed vulture, sensing fresh carry-on. Her blonde hair was styled in those effortless waves that actually took 2 hours and $300 to achieve, and she was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Emma, don't be ridiculous," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension she'd perfected over the years. "Where could you possibly have to go that's more important than family obligations? Family obligations. That's what they called it when they needed me to work for free." When Grace needed to attend charity galas, or Mother needed to host dinner parties, or Dad needed someone to manage the household staff, it was always family obligations. But when I needed support, understanding, or even basic respect, suddenly family meant something else entirely. "Florida," I said simply. "Florida." Mother's voice hit a pitch that could probably be heard in Connecticut. "What's in Florida that's so important you'd abandon your family on Christmas?" I could have told them. I could have explained that I had a business meeting scheduled for December 26th that could change everything. I could have mentioned the contract worth more money than they'd probably see in 5 years. I could have revealed that while they thought I was a 32-year-old failure living in their guest house, I was actually running a company that employed 50 people and generated 8 figures in annual revenue. But why ruin the surprise business? I said instead. Grace actually laughed, actually threw her head back and laughed like I'd told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. Business. Emma, you don't have a business. You barely have a job. There it was, the casual cruelty that had defined my relationship with my family for over a decade. The assumption that because I didn't flaunt my success, because I didn't brag about my achievements, because I didn't need their money or their connections, I must be failing at life. They had no idea that I'd been deliberately keeping my success hidden, partly out of privacy, and partly because I'd wanted to see how long they'd continue treating me like hired help if they thought I had nowhere else to go. The answer apparently was 15 years and counting. Emma. Dad's voice carried that tone, the one that had made junior executives tremble in boardrooms across Manhattan. Your mother has been planning this dinner for months. Victoria Chen, from Pinnacle Corporation, will be there along with several other very influential people. This is not the time for whatever quarter-life crisis you're having. Quarter-life crisis. At 32. Actually, Dad, I'm pretty sure this is exactly the time. I moved toward the front door, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. You'll figure something out. You always do. We will not figure something out. Mother's voice cracked with the desperation of someone whose entire social standing was about to crumble. I specifically told Victoria Chen that my daughter would be preparing a gourmet Christmas feast. She's expecting something spectacular. And there it was, the real issue. Not that they'd miss me, not that they valued my presence, but that they'd already used my name as social currency, and now the check was about to bounce. Victoria Chen. Even I had to admit that name carried weight. CEO of Pinnacle Corporation, one of the most powerful women in American business, someone whose favor could open doors throughout the corporate world. I knew because I'd been trying to get a meeting with her for 2 years. The irony was almost too perfect. I'm sure Grace can handle it, I said, glancing at my sister, who looked like she'd rather volunteer for experimental surgery than step foot in a kitchen. She went to culinary school, right? Oh, wait, that was me. She got her MBA from Wharton, right? Oh, wait, that was also me. Culinary school doesn't count when you're not using it professionally, Grace snapped, and everyone knows you only went to Wharton because Dad pulled strings. The casual dismissal of my achievements hit like a familiar slap. My culinary degree from the Culinary Institute of America, where I'd graduated summa cum laude. My MBA from Wharton, where I'd earned a full academic scholarship and graduated in the top 5% of my class. None of it mattered to them because none of it fit their narrative of Emma, the family disappointment. Right, I said, just like everyone knows I'm a failure who lives in your guest house and can't hold down a real job. Well, Grace shrugged as if the truth was self-evident. I looked around the foyer at the family photos where I was either absent or pushed to the background, at the awards and achievements covering the walls that belonged to everyone but me, at the 3 people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, but had spent 15 years making me feel like an unwanted house guest. You know what? You're absolutely right, Grace. I am a disappointment. I'm disappointing you right now by refusing to spend my Christmas cooking for people who think I'm invisible. I'm disappointing Dad by not prioritizing his business relationships over my own life. And I'm disappointing Mother by not being the perfect little servant she's spent 15 years trying to create. I opened the front door, letting in a blast of December air that made everyone shiver. But here's the thing about disappointment. It only hurts when you care about someone's opinion. And I'm finally realizing that maybe I don't care about yours anymore. Emma, wait. Dad stood up, his newspaper falling to the floor. For a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw something that might have been genuine concern. Let's talk about this reasonably. What would it take for you to stay? We could pay you for catering the dinner. pay me. After 15 years of free labor, they were offering to pay me. How much? I asked, genuinely curious. $2,000, Mother said quickly. That's very generous for one dinner. $2,000. I made more than that in the time it would take me to drive to the airport. Make it $10,000, I said. The silence that followed was deafening. $10,000? Grace's voice cracked. For one dinner, that's insane.
Is it? Let's see. 25 guests, gourmet multi-course meal, 24 hours notice, Christmas Day service. Professional caterers would charge at least $15,000 for an event like that, and most wouldn't even take a booking on such short notice. I paused at the threshold. But you're right. $10,000 is too much to pay someone you consider family. Emma, be reasonable, Dad said. $10,000 is exactly what my time is worth, I finished. But don't worry about it. I'm sure you can find someone else. Maybe try calling around to some local restaurants. I hear Applebee's might be open. Mother's gasp was audible from 3 states away. You wouldn't dare leave us hanging like this, she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now, the first crack in her armor of assumed authority. Wouldn't I? I stepped fully outside, breathing in the cold air like freedom itself. Watch me. Emma! Grace's voice followed me down the front steps. You can't just abandon us. We're your family. I turned back one last time, looking up at the 3 people silhouetted in the doorway of the house where I'd never quite belonged. Family is supposed to support each other, Grace. Family is supposed to celebrate each other's successes, not dismiss them. Family is supposed to love each other unconditionally, not treat each other like employees who can be fired at will. I hefted my luggage into the back seat of my Tesla Model S, another purchase they'd dismissed as trying too hard to look successful. You want to know what I've learned in 32 years? Being related to someone doesn't make them family, it just makes them relatives. The drive to JFK felt like crossing the border into a foreign country, one where I was valued, respected, and appreciated for who I actually was, rather than who someone else needed me to be. My phone started ringing before I'd even reached the highway. Mother, of course, then Dad, then Grace, then Mother again. I let them go to voicemail, focusing instead on the road ahead and the meeting that waited for me in Florida. By the time I reached the airport, I had 17 missed calls and 12 text messages, each one more desperate than the last. Mother. Emma, please reconsider. We can discuss this like adults. Dad. This is very unprofessional behavior. I expected better from you. Grace. You're being incredibly selfish. What am I supposed to tell people? Mother, I'll pay you $5,000. Final offer. Dad. Your mother is having a panic attack. I hope you're happy. Grace. Fine, $10,000, but you have to come back right now. I turned off my phone as I walked through the terminal, my heels clicking against the polished floor with the same rhythm they'd made in the foyer, the sound of someone walking toward freedom rather than away from it. The first-class lounge was nearly empty, most travelers having already reached their Christmas destinations. I settled into a leather chair with a glass of champagne and finally allowed myself to think about what I'd just done. 15 years. 15 years of cooking elaborate meals for their dinner parties while being introduced as our daughter who's still figuring things out. 15 years of managing their household staff, organizing their social events, and handling their personal emergencies while listening to them tell friends that I wasn't quite ready for the real world yet. 15 years of watching Grace get credit for achievements she'd never earned, while my actual accomplishments were dismissed as luck or charity. The worst part wasn't the work itself. I actually enjoyed cooking and event planning. The worst part was the invisibility, the casual assumption that my time, my skills, and my life were less valuable than everyone else's. The worst part was watching them treat me like a live-in servant while congratulating themselves on their generosity for letting me stay in the guest house until I got back on my feet.
What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask about, was that I'd never fallen off my feet in the first place. Stellar Events had started as a side hustle during my last year at Wharton. A few catered study sessions for classmates, some informal dinner parties for professors, small corporate events for local businesses, nothing flashy, nothing that would attract my family's attention or judgment. But word of mouth in the luxury event. Planning world travels fast, especially when you can combine Michelin star, quality food with flawless execution and absolute discretion. Within 2 years, I was planning events for Fortune 500 companies. Within 5 years, I had a full staff and a client waiting list that stretched 6 months out. For the past 3 years, Stellar Events had been one of the most sought-after luxury catering companies on the East Coast. We specialized in high-end corporate events, exclusive private parties, and celebrity functions where privacy was as important as presentation. Our client list read like a who's who of American business and entertainment, and our booking calendar was solid through the next 18 months. I deliberately kept the company's public profile low and operated under a business structure that didn't require my name to be prominently displayed. Most clients knew me as E. Carter if they dealt with me directly at all. My staff handled most of the day-to-day operations, and I usually worked behind the scenes on planning and logistics. It had been surprisingly easy to hide my success from my family, partly because they'd never shown any interest in my life beyond how it could serve their needs, and partly because I'd gotten tired of having my achievements minimized or attributed to luck. The first time I'd mentioned landing a major corporate client, Mother had said, "That's nice, dear, but when are you going to get a real job?" The first time I'd tried to explain that my catering business was actually quite successful, Dad had patted my shoulder and said, "It's good to have hobbies, but you can't build a career on party planning." After a while, it became easier to let them believe what they wanted to believe. They saw me living in their guest house, which I paid market rent for, though they'd never acknowledged that and assumed I was struggling financially. They saw me without a traditional corporate job and assumed I was unemployed. They saw me available for their last-minute demands and assumed I had nothing better to do. What they didn't see was the separate entrance to my living space that allowed clients and staff to come and go without disturbing the main house. They didn't see the state-of-the-art kitchen I'd had installed in the converted carriage house behind the pool. They didn't see the business meetings I conducted from my home office or the revenue statements that showed consistent 7-figure growth year after year. They didn't see any of it because they'd never bothered to look. My phone buzzed with a notification despite being on airplane mode, a message from my assistant Sarah, who was probably the most competent person I'd ever hired and definitely more organized than most Fortune 500 executives. Flight update on schedule for 11:45 p.m. departure. Car service confirmed for Miami pickup. Meeting materials uploaded to secure server.
Victoria Chen's team confirmed 10 a.m. meeting at Fontainebleau. Also, your family has called the office 6 times in the past hour. Should I continue forwarding to voicemail? I typed back quickly. Yes, continue voicemail protocol. They'll figure it out eventually. Thank you for handling everything perfectly, as usual. Always a pleasure. Knock 'em dead tomorrow, boss. Tomorrow. The meeting I'd been working toward for 2 years, the contract that would establish Stellar Events as a major player in the national luxury catering market, the partnership that would open doors I'd only dreamed of walking through. Victoria Chen had been remarkably difficult to pin down for a meeting. Pinnacle Corporation's events were handled through a series of regional contractors, but they were looking to streamline their national event planning under one premium vendor. The contract was worth $2 million annually with options for expansion into international markets.
Getting on Victoria's radar had required a combination of strategic networking, impeccable reputation building, and what could only be described as divine intervention when her previous caterer had catastrophically failed at a board dinner 3 months ago, and my company had stepped in with 6 hours' notice to save the day. We delivered what Victoria later described as the most seamlessly executed event recovery in corporate history, turning a potential disaster into an evening that actually strengthened business relationships instead of destroying them. That success had earned me this meeting, this opportunity, this chance to prove that stellar events belonged in the same conversation as the industry's biggest names. The irony that my family was at this very moment probably explaining to Victoria Chen that their unemployed daughter would be cooking Christmas dinner was not lost on me. The additional irony that Victoria had no idea the caterer she'd been trying to hire for months was the same person my family was describing as a failure was almost too perfect to believe. But life, I'd learned, had a sense of humor that ranged from gently amusing to absolutely savage. Final boarding call for Flight 847 to Miami. I gathered my belongings and walked toward the gate, leaving behind 15 years of being underestimated, undervalued, and utterly invisible. What my family didn't know was that invisible people see everything. They hear every conversation, witness every dismissal, absorb every casual cruelty. They learn to rely on themselves because no one else is paying attention. They develop skills, build resources, and create opportunities because waiting for someone else to notice them is a luxury they can't afford. What my family was about to learn was that invisible people, when they finally step into the light, can be absolutely blinding. As the plane lifted off from JFK, I looked down at the lights of New York spreading out below like stars, each one representing someone's dreams, ambitions, and possibilities. Tomorrow, I would add my own light to that constellation, not as Emma Carter, the family disappointment, but as E. Carter, CEO of Stellar Events, the woman who turned being underestimated into her greatest competitive advantage. Somewhere below, my family was probably still trying to figure out how to explain to 25 VIP guests that the dinner they'd promised wouldn't be happening. Somewhere below, Victoria Chen was probably wondering why she'd never been able to reach the mysterious E. Carter, whose company had saved her event 3 months ago. Tomorrow, she'd get her answer. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, for the first time in 15 years, I was flying toward something that belonged entirely to me. The Miami morning sun felt like a benediction against my skin as I stepped out of the Fontainebleau's elevator on the 42nd floor. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, a canvas of blue that seemed to promise infinite possibilities. I'd slept better than I had in months, partly because of the Egyptian cotton sheets, and partly because I'd finally stopped carrying the weight of my family's expectations. My phone had been mercifully quiet during the flight, but the morning brought a fresh avalanche of notifications. 37 missed calls, 41 text messages, 6 voicemails that I could see grew progressively more frantic based on their timestamps. I scrolled through the texts while walking toward Pinnacle Corporation's temporary Miami offices. Mother, 6:23 a.m. Emma, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this needs to stop. Call me immediately. Grace, 6:45 a.m. Mom is having a complete breakdown. Dad's trying to find emergency caterers, but everything's booked. You've really done it this time. Dad, 7:12 a.m. I've called in every favor I have. The best I could find is a local Italian place that does family-style dinners. This is going to be a disaster, and it's entirely your fault. Should there 7:33 a.m. I had to tell Victoria Chen that you're sick with food poisoning. She was very understanding, but I could tell she was disappointed. I hope you're proud of yourself. Food poisoning. Of course, that's what they'd gone with. God forbid they admit their daughter had a spine and had finally used it. The final text sent just 20 minutes ago made me stop walking entirely, Thrice. 8:41 a.m. Pizza. We ordered pizza for Victoria Chen and the other executives. Pizza Emma, from Tony's down the street. I want you to think about that while you're having your little tantrum in Florida. Pizza. They'd served Victoria Chen, one of the most powerful women in corporate America, pizza on Christmas Day because they couldn't conceive of a world where I might have something more important to do than serve their needs. The absurdity was so perfect, I actually laughed out loud, earning curious looks from other hotel guests in the corridor. "Ms. Carter!" A voice behind me made me turn. A young woman in an impeccably tailored navy suit was approaching with the kind of efficient purposefulness that screamed executive assistant. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, Ms. Chen's assistant. She's ready for you in the conference room." "Perfect timing," I said, slipping my phone into my purse. "Lead the way." The conference room was a study in understated power, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay, a gleaming mahogany table that could seat 20, and technology that probably cost more than most people's houses. Victoria Chen stood at the far end of the room, silhouetted against the Miami skyline, like a figure from a corporate mythology. She was smaller than I'd expected, but carried herself with the kind of presence that made physical stature irrelevant. Her black hair was pulled back in a severe chignon that somehow managed to look both professional and effortlessly elegant. Her charcoal gray suit was clearly bespoke, and her handshake when she extended it was firm enough to crack walnuts. "Ms. Carter," she said, and her voice carried the subtle accent of someone who'd learned English as a second language, but spoke it better than most native speakers. "I have to say you've been remarkably elusive. When my team told me we'd finally managed to schedule a meeting with the mysterious E. Carter, I cleared my entire morning." "I appreciate you making the time, especially during the holidays," I replied, settling into the chair across from her. "I know how valuable your schedule is, and time is the only resource we can't manufacture more of," she said, opening a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my first car. "Your company saved my board dinner 3 months ago when Morrison Catering had their unfortunate incident. I've been wanting to discuss a more formal partnership ever since." The Morrison incident. I remembered it well. Their head chef had suffered a heart attack 4 hours before service. Their backup had quit that morning over a payroll dispute, and their entire operation had collapsed like a house of cards. Victoria's assistant had found my emergency contact through a mutual connection, and I'd mobilized my entire Miami team to deliver a 7-course dinner for 48 board members and their spouses. "That was quite the challenge," I said, "but my team thrives under pressure. We've built our reputation on turning potential disasters into memorable experiences." "Indeed." Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying me with the intensity of a chess grandmaster planning several moves ahead. "Which brings me to why we're here. Pinnacle is expanding our corporate event programming significantly over the next 3 years. We're looking for a national partner who can handle everything from intimate board dinners to large-scale shareholder meetings with the same level of excellence regardless of location or circumstances." She slid a bound document across the table. "This contract represents a $2 million annual commitment with performance bonuses that could increase that figure substantially. We're talking about 40 to 50 events per year, ranging from 20-person dinners to 1,000-person galas." I opened the document quickly, scanning the terms while maintaining an expression of professional interest. The numbers were even better than I'd hoped. Not just the base contract value, but the expansion clauses that could triple our annual revenue within 5 years. "The scope is impressive," I said. "May I ask what made Pinnacle decide to consolidate their event planning under a single vendor?" "Cost efficiency, certainly, but more importantly, consistency of experience. When Pinnacle hosts an event, whether it's in New York or Los Angeles or Miami, our guests should receive the same level of service, the same attention to detail, the same—" She paused, searching for the right word, "sophistication." My phone buzzed against the table. Grace's name flashed on the screen, probably calling to deliver more updates about the Christmas Day pizza disaster. I declined the call without looking away from Victoria. Brand integrity, I said. Every touch point with your stakeholders should reinforce Pinnacle's reputation for excellence. Exactly. Victoria's smile was the first genuine expression I'd seen from her. You understand the psychology of corporate hospitality. It's not just about feeding people, it's about creating an environment where business relationships can flourish. She was right, of course. I'd learned early in my career that the most successful events weren't just well-executed parties, they were carefully orchestrated experiences designed to make guests feel valued, important, and positively predisposed toward whatever business was being conducted. Tell me about your current capacity, Victoria continued. The document outlines our projected event calendar for the next year. Do you have the infrastructure to handle this volume while maintaining quality? Stellar Events currently employs 52 full-time staff across 4 regional offices. I replied.
We also maintain relationships with carefully vetted contractors in 12 additional markets, allowing us to scale operations as needed without compromising our standards. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Dad. I let it go to voicemail. Impressive for a company that maintains such a low public profile, Victoria observed. Most firms your size leverage their client relationships for marketing purposes. Discretion is part of our value proposition, I said. Many of our clients prefer their events to focus on the experience rather than who provided it. We've found that exceptional service speaks louder than any marketing campaign. Speaking of clients, I'd like to discuss references. Obviously, confidentiality agreements limit what you can share, but I'd appreciate some general insights into your experience with similar large-scale partnerships.
I walked her through 3 case studies, a tech company's annual conference for 800 attendees, a pharmaceutical company's series of FDA compliance dinners, and a media conglomerate's awards season events. I kept the details general enough to protect client confidentiality while specific enough to demonstrate our capabilities. My phone had been buzzing intermittently throughout our conversation, and I finally turned it face down on the table. Victoria noticed the gesture. I apologize for the interruptions. I said, family emergency, they'll figure it out. Of course. Victoria's expression was understanding, but I caught something else in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe even recognition. Family can be demanding during the holidays. Something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. There was a story there, some shared understanding of complicated family dynamics that successful women often developed like calluses on their souls.
Indeed they can, I said simply. Well, Victoria closed her portfolio with a decisive snap. I think we've covered the essential points. Your company's reputation speaks for itself, and after what you accomplished for us in October, I'm confident Stellar Events can meet our requirements. She stood extending her hand again. I'll have my legal team review the terms with yours, but barring any significant issues, I'd like to have this partnership formalized by New Year's Day. That timeline works perfectly, I said, shaking her hand. The deal was done. I could feel it in the firmness of her grip, see it in the satisfied expression on her face. There is one thing I'm curious about, Victoria said as we walked toward the door. Your business address lists a Westchester location. Do you mind me asking if that's anywhere near the Carter estate? I had dinner there once several years ago. Beautiful property. The question hit me like ice water. Of course, Victoria would know my parents' address. She was having dinner there tomorrow night, or rather she was having pizza there tomorrow night. It's in the same general area, I said carefully. Lovely neighborhood, very exclusive. Victoria paused at the door, her hand on the handle. The Carters have a daughter about your age, if I recall correctly. Margaret mentioned she was in the food service industry. Small world, isn't it? The moment stretched between us like a tight rope. Victoria's expression was perfectly neutral, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she was connecting dots I hadn't realized were visible. Quite small, I managed. Well, I should let you get back to your family emergency, Victoria said, opening the door. Jennifer will coordinate with your office on the contract details. I look forward to a very successful partnership, Ms. Carter.
I walked back to the elevator in a daze, my mind racing through the implications of that final exchange. Did Victoria know? Had she figured out that the Emma Carter my parents had described as unemployed and living in their guest house was the same E. Carter she'd been trying to hire for months? The elevator doors closed, and I finally allowed myself to process what had just happened. $2 million annually, national expansion, partnership with one of the most respected corporations in America. Everything I'd worked toward for the past 5 years had just crystallized into reality. My phone rang as I reached the lobby. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "Congratulations are in order, I assume," she said without preamble. "How did you never mind? I don't want to know how you always know these things," I said, walking toward the hotel's oceanfront terrace. "Yes, congratulations are definitely in order. We just landed the biggest contract in Stellar Events history." "Excellent. Should I prepare the champagne and the expansion plans?" "Both. And Sarah booked the Forbes interview for next week. I think it's time for E. Carter to step into the spotlight." "About time," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Your family has called 17 more times since I last updated you. Should I continue the voicemail protocol?" "Actually," I said, settling into a chair overlooking the ocean, "I think I'll take the next one. I suspect they're about to have a very interesting afternoon." As if summoned by my words, the phone began ringing. Grace's name flashed on the screen. "Showtime," I murmured and answered the call. "Emma!" Grace's voice was shrill with panic. "Thank God you finally answered. This is a complete disaster." "What's wrong, Grace?" I asked, settling back to enjoy the show. "Everything. The pizza was a catastrophe. Victoria Chen barely touched her food, and I could tell she was horrified. Dad tried to make jokes about keeping things casual, but nobody was laughing. And then, oh God, Emma, then it got worse. How could it possibly get worse? Mrs. Morrison, you remember Mrs. Morrison from the country club? She asked about you. Specifically, she said she'd heard wonderful things about your catering business and wanted to know if you'd be available for her daughter's wedding." I felt my eyebrows climb toward my hairline. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her you weren't really in the catering business professionally. I said you just like to cook as a hobby." Grace's voice cracked with hysteria. "But then Victoria Chen got this really strange look on her face, and she asked what your full name was." "Oh no," I said, though inside I was thinking, oh yes. "Emma, she knew you. Victoria Chen knew you. She said she'd been trying to get in touch with an E. Carter who runs some big catering company, and when I said your name was Emma Carter, she just stared at me." The pieces were falling into place beautifully, like dominoes arranged by a master craftsman. "What did she say?" I asked. "She asked for your contact information. She said she had some questions about a business matter. Emma, please tell me you don't actually run some secret catering company that we don't know about." I looked out at the Miami skyline, at the ocean, stretching toward the horizon, at the world, full of possibilities that had opened up in front of me in the past 24 hours. "Grace," I said slowly, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." "Okay." "In the 15 years since I graduated from college, have you ever even once asked me about my life? About what I do for work, where my money comes from, what my goals and dreams are?" Silence. "Have any of you ever shown genuine interest in my success, my happiness, or my well-being beyond how it might serve your immediate needs?" More silence. The answer is no, Grace. None of you have. You've spent 15 years telling people I was a failure without ever bothering to learn whether that was actually true. Emma, what are you saying? I'm saying that Victoria Chen wasn't asking random questions about my contact information. I'm saying that the e-carter she's been trying to reach is exactly who you think it is. And I'm saying that while you were serving her pizza on Christmas Day, I was in Miami signing a $2 million contract with her company. The silence that followed was so complete, I wondered if the call had dropped. You're lying, Grace whispered finally. Am I? Call Victoria Chen and ask her? Better yet, ask her to describe the woman she met with this morning. Ask her about the company that saved her board dinner 3 months ago when no other caterer in the city could help her. This isn't possible. You live in our guest house. You don't have a job. And I live in your guest house because I pay you market rate rent for a private space with a separate entrance and a commercial-grade kitchen. I don't have a traditional job because I own a company that employs 52 people and generates 8-figure annual revenue. Another stretched silence. You're serious, Grace said, and her voice had changed completely. Less hysteria, more shock. I really. And Grace, the best part is that this conversation is probably happening right about now in your living room too. Because I guarantee Victoria Chen is asking Mother and Dad some very pointed questions about their unemployed daughter, who apparently runs one of the most successful luxury catering companies on the East Coast. I could practically hear Grace's world reshaping itself through the phone. Why didn't you tell us? She asked finally. When would I have told you? Between being ordered to cook dinner for your friends, or being dismissed when I tried to talk about my work, or being introduced as the daughter who was still figuring things out. We could have helped you. We have connections, influence. I didn't need your help, Grace. That's what you never understood. I didn't need your connections or your influence or your approval. I needed your respect, and that was apparently too much to ask for. Emma, please. We can fix this. You can come home and we'll... I am home, I said, looking out at the ocean. I'm exactly where I belong, doing exactly what I was meant to do with people who value what I bring to the table. My phone beeped with an incoming call. Dad's name appeared on the screen. Grace, I have to go. Dad's calling, and I suspect he has some interesting news to share. Emma, wait. Tell Mother I hope she enjoyed her pizza, I said, and switched to the incoming call. Emma. Yeah, Dad's voice was tight with something I'd never heard before. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. We need to talk. Hello, Dad. How was Christmas dinner? Cut the act. Victoria Chen just told us who you really are. I'm exactly who I've always been. You just finally bothered to pay attention. Why didn't you tell us about your company? I laughed, and the sound echoed across the terrace. When would I have told you? Should I have mentioned it while I was cooking Thanksgiving dinner for 30 people, or maybe during one of Grace's engagement parties when you introduced me as your daughter who helps around the house? You could have said something at any time. I tried. For years I tried. But every time I mentioned my work, you dismissed it as a hobby. Every time I talked about my clients, you changed the subject. Every time I achieved something significant, you found a way to minimize it. That's not true.
Do you remember when I told you I'd catered a Fortune 500 company retreat? You said, "That's nice, dear, but when are you going to get a real job?" Do you remember when I mentioned handling a celebrity wedding? You said, "Anyone can throw a party, Emma. You need to think about your future." Silence. The truth is, Dad, you never wanted to hear about my success because it didn't fit the narrative you'd created about me. It was easier to believe I was failing than to acknowledge that I'd succeeded without your help. Victoria Chen says, you're one of the most successful event planners in the country. Victoria Chen is correct. She says you just signed a multi-million-dollar contract with Pinnacle Corporation. Also correct. She says, his voice dropped to something approaching awe. She says Forbes is doing a feature story about you next month. They are. 40, under 40, the invisible entrepreneurs. Apparently, I'm their cover story.
The silence stretched so long I wondered if he'd hung up. Why? He asked finally. Why what? Why didn't you rub our faces in it? Why didn't you prove us wrong years ago? Why did you let us think that I was a failure? Because proving you wrong would have required caring about your opinion, and I finally realized that the opinion of people who never bothered to know me wasn't worth the energy it would take to change it. Emma, we're your family. Are you? Because family is supposed to support each other. Family is supposed to celebrate each other's successes. Family is supposed to love each other unconditionally. What you've been is a collection of people who happen to share my DNA and who've spent 15 years treating me like an employee who could be fired at will. We can change. We can do better. Can you? Because change isn't just saying different words, Dad. Change is fundamentally shifting how you see and treat the people around you. Change is acknowledging that you were wrong, not just about my career, but about who I am as a person. We were wrong, he said quietly. Victoria made that very clear. Victoria's opinion matters to you because she's powerful and wealthy and connected. But my happiness should have mattered to you because I'm your daughter. It does matter. Does it? Then why did it take Victoria Chen to make you realize I was worth listening to? Another long pause. What do you want from us? He asked finally. Nothing, I said, and realized as I said it that it was completely true. I don't want anything from any of you anymore. I wanted your respect, your support, your genuine interest in my life and my happiness. But I'm 32 years old, Dad. I've built a successful business, assembled an incredible team, and created a life that fulfills me completely. I don't need your validation anymore. Emma, please, your mother is devastated. Grace is in tears. We all realize we made mistakes. You didn't make mistakes, Dad. Mistakes are accidental. What you did was deliberate and sustained. You chose to dismiss me, ignore me, and treat me like hired help for 15 years. Those weren't errors in judgment, they were choices. So what happens now? I looked out at the ocean again, at the endless horizon that seemed to promise infinite possibilities. Now I go back to my life. I continue building my company, serving my clients, and surrounding myself with people who see my value without needing a Forbes cover story to convince them. And us, you figure out how to live with the consequences of your choices, just like I had to figure out how to live with being invisible in my own family. Emma. Goodbye, Dad. Enjoy explaining to your social circle how your unemployed daughter turned out to be more successful than any of you imagined. I hung up and turned off my phone, settling back into my chair to watch the waves roll in from the Atlantic. Tomorrow, the Forbes photographer would arrive to shoot the cover story. Tomorrow, the business world would learn that the mysterious E. Carter, who'd been quietly building an empire, was actually Emma Carter, the woman who'd turned being underestimated into her greatest competitive advantage. But today, I was simply going to sit by the ocean and enjoy the sound of my family's world falling apart one phone call at a time. The sun was setting over Miami, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that no chef could recreate, no matter how skilled. And for the first time in 15 years, I was exactly where I belonged. The waves had turned silver in the moonlight by the time I finally turned my phone back on. 83 missed calls, 112 text messages. My voicemail was so full, the system had stopped accepting new messages. The digital avalanche of desperation would have been satisfying if it weren't so pathetic. 15 years of treating me like furniture, and now that furniture had revealed itself to be a priceless antique they couldn't stop calling. I scrolled through the messages while sipping a glass of Chateau Margaux on my hotel balcony. The progression told a story more dramatic than anything Hollywood could have scripted. Mother, 3:47 p.m. Victoria Chen is asking very uncomfortable questions. Call me immediately. That at 4:23 p.m. Emma, what exactly did you tell Victoria? She's acting like she knows you personally. Dad, 4:45 p.m. Victoria just showed us your company's website. We need to talk. Now. 12 p.m. I don't understand how this happened.
How long have you been lying to us, Grace? 5:38 p.m. The Pinnacle Corporation contract is real. I looked it up. Emma, how is this possible? That's 6:15 p.m. Your mother fainted when Victoria explained who you really are. Are you proud of yourself? The messages grew more frantic as the evening progressed, each one revealing another layer of their humiliation. But the real entertainment began around 7 o'clock when the story apparently started spreading beyond our immediate family circle. Grace, 7:23 p.m. Mrs. Morrison called 3 times. She wants to hire you for the wedding. She's offering $50,000. Mother, 7:45 p.m. The Hendersons are asking if you can cater their New Year's party. I don't know what to tell them. At 8:17 p.m. Victoria Chen posted something on LinkedIn about her meeting with you. People are calling to congratulate us on your success. I feel like a fool. Grace, 5:02 p.m. It's on the Country Club Facebook page. Someone posted Victoria's LinkedIn update. Everyone knows now. Mother, at 31 p.m. The phone hasn't stopped ringing. Everyone wants to know why we never mentioned your company. What am I supposed to say, Dad? 10:04 p.m. I just watched a YouTube video about stellar events. There are clips of events you catered for Fortune 500 companies. When did this happen? How did we not know? The desperation was palpable even through text messages. 3 people who'd spent 15 years dismissing my existence were suddenly desperate to claim credit for my success to somehow retroactively become the supportive family they'd never actually been. My phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and I answered immediately. Please, tell me you're watching this unfold in real time, she said without preamble. I'm reading the text messages like a very expensive soap opera, I replied. Please tell me you have updates from the field. Oh, honey, do I have updates? First, Victoria Chen's LinkedIn post has been shared over 2,000 times. The business world is buzzing about the mysterious E. Carter finally stepping into the spotlight. Second, we've received 47 new client inquiries since this afternoon. Third, your Forbes interview has been moved up to tomorrow because apparently everyone wants to know who you are now. And fourth, I asked because I could hear more excitement in her voice. Fourth, I may have accidentally forgotten to mention to the Forbes reporter that your family had no idea about your company's success. When he called to confirm details for the interview, he asked about your family's reaction to your success, and I might have said something about how they were completely shocked to learn the truth about Emma's achievements. I nearly choked on my wine. Sarah, you didn't. I absolutely did. The article is going to include a section about successful entrepreneurs whose families underestimated them. Apparently, it's more common than people think, and they want to explore the psychology of family dynamics in entrepreneurial success stories. You're diabolical. I'm thorough. There's a difference. Another call was coming through. Grace again. I have to take this, I told Sarah. Keep me posted on any other developments. Will do. Oh, and Emma Channel 7 wants to do a segment about local entrepreneurs who've been flying under the radar. Apparently, Victoria Chen gave them your name as someone worth featuring. I switched to Grace's call, curious to see how the narrative had evolved in the past few hours. Emma? Grace's voice was breathless with excitement that sounded forced. Thank God you answered. This is incredible news about your company. The sudden enthusiasm was jarring after 15 years of casual dismissal. Is it? I asked carefully. Of course it is. We're so proud of you. I've been telling everyone about my incredibly successful sister who owns this amazing catering empire. Mrs. Patterson from the club said she's been trying to book stellar events for months, but couldn't get through. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "Grace," I said finally, "yesterday you told me I didn't have a real job. This morning you told Victoria Chen that my catering was just a hobby. 6 hours ago, you were calling it impossible that I could run a successful business. What exactly changed between then and now? Emma, that's not fair. We just didn't understand the scope of what you were doing." "You didn't understand because you never asked. You never showed the slightest interest in my life beyond how it could serve yours. We're interested now. Now that Victoria Chen has validated my worth, now that the country club is buzzing about my success, now that there's social currency in claiming me as family," Grace's voice took on that wheedling tone she'd perfected as a child when she wanted something. "Emma, I know we made mistakes, but we're family. We should be celebrating this together." "We should have been celebrating it together for the past 5 years, Grace. But you were too busy introducing me as your sister, who helps around the house, to notice I was building something extraordinary. How were we supposed to know you never told us?" The accusation hit like a slap, mostly because it contained just enough truth to sting. "I tried to tell you. Remember when I mentioned handling that pharmaceutical company's conference? You said, 'That's nice, but when are you going to get a real job?' Remember when I talked about expanding into new markets? Dad said, 'Business is complicated, Emma. You should focus on realistic goals.' We were trying to protect you from disappointment. You were trying to keep me in a box labeled family failure because it was easier than acknowledging I might actually be successful without your help. That's not true. Isn't it, Grace? Be honest when you introduce me to people. How do you describe what I do for a living? Silence. How did you describe me to Victoria Chen yesterday? More silence. You told her I was unemployed and living in your guest house, didn't you? You did, because that's how you see me. That's how you've always seen me. And the only reason you're calling me now with fake enthusiasm is because Victoria Chen forced you to realize you were wrong. We want to make this right. Do you? Or do you want to control the narrative? Do you want to be able to tell your friends that you always knew I was destined for greatness? That you were secretly supporting my dreams all along? Emma, please. Mom is devastated. She says she failed as a mother. She did fail as a mother. All of you failed as a family, but not because you didn't recognize my business success, because you never bothered to know me as a person. My phone beeped with another incoming call. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. "Grace, I have to go. I have actual business to attend to." "Wait, Emma, the Forbes thing. Can you mention the family? Maybe talk about how we supported your dreams." The audacity was breathtaking. You want me to lie to Forbes magazine about how supportive you've been? Not lie, just emphasize the positive aspects of our relationship. What positive aspects, Grace, name one time in the past 15 years when any of you actively supported my professional ambitions? Silence. I thought so. Goodbye, Grace. I switched to the unknown number, curiosity overriding caution. "Ms. Carter, this is James Mitchell from Forbes. I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all, Mr. Mitchell. What can I do for you?" "I'm calling about tomorrow's interview. I've been doing some preliminary research on your company, and I have to say the story is fascinating. Your ability to build such a successful enterprise while maintaining such a low public profile is remarkable." "Thank you. I've always believed that results speak louder than publicity." "Indeed. I'm particularly interested in exploring the personal side of your journey. Building a business is challenging enough, but doing it without family support must have been particularly difficult." My heart rate picked up. "Family support? Your assistant mentioned that your family was quite surprised to learn about your success. That suggests you've been navigating this journey largely on your own. I think our readers would be interested in that dynamic, how family relationships can both help and hinder entrepreneurial success." "Sarah, you magnificent woman. It's a complex situation," I said carefully. "I'm sure it is. Family dynamics often are, especially when success challenges existing power structures. Would you be comfortable discussing how your family's initial lack of understanding affected your business development?"
I think that could be a valuable conversation. Excellent. I've scheduled us for 10 a.m. at your hotel. I'm bringing a photographer. We're hoping to capture some shots for the cover story. Cover story. The words sent a thrill of satisfaction through me that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with vindication. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony, watching the lights of Miami twinkle like fallen stars. Tomorrow, my face would be on the cover of Forbes magazine. Tomorrow, the business world would know that Emma Carter, the woman my family had dismissed as a failure, was actually one of the most successful entrepreneurs of her generation. My phone rang again. Mother this time. Emma, darling, and the endearment sounded forced, like she was reading from a script. I've been thinking about our conversation today, and I realize I may have been hasty in my judgments. Hasty about your business endeavors. I didn't fully understand the scope of what you'd accomplished. You didn't understand because you never asked. You assumed I was failing because I wasn't flaunting my success. I know, and I'm sorry. Victoria Chen spoke very highly of your company. She said you saved one of her most important events when another caterer failed. I did. She also said you're one of the most professional people she's ever worked with. I am. Emma, I know I haven't always been the most supportive mother. The understatement was so massive it bordered on comedy. Mother, you ordered me to cook for 25 people on Christmas Day.
When I refused, you told those same people that I was sick with food poisoning, rather than admit your daughter might have her own life and priorities. I was embarrassed I had promised them a beautiful dinner, and you were embarrassed that your daughter had finally stood up to 15 years of being treated like hired help. That's not how I saw it. How did you see it, Mother? How did you see me living in your guest house, cooking for your parties, managing your household staff, organizing your social events? What did you think I was a very expensive domestic servant? I thought you were finding your way. I thought you needed time to figure out what you wanted to do with your life. I knew what I wanted to do with my life when I was 22. I've been doing it for the past 10 years. You just never bothered to pay attention. I was trying to help. I was trying to give you a safe place to land while you figured things out.
You were trying to keep me dependent on you, so you'd always have someone available to handle the things you didn't want to deal with yourself. The accusation hung between us like a blade. That's a terrible thing to say to your mother. It's a terrible thing to do to your daughter. Emma, I love you. Do you? Or do you love the idea of me? Do you love having a daughter who's convenient and available and willing to sacrifice her own plans for yours? Because the daughter you claim to love wouldn't have built a multi-million-dollar company without telling you about it. I want to understand. Help me understand. It's too late for understanding, Mother. Understanding requires curiosity, and you've never been curious about who I actually am. You've been too invested in who you needed me to be. We can start over. We can do better. Can you? Because doing better isn't just saying different words. Doing better means fundamentally changing how you see me, how you treat me, how you value my time and my dreams and my autonomy. I'm willing to try. Are you willing to try, or are you willing to try because Victoria Chen made you realize that dismissing me was socially embarrassing? Silence. That's what I thought. Emma, please. The whole country club is talking about your success. The Hendersons want to hire you for their anniversary party. Mrs. Morrison is desperate to book you for her daughter's wedding. Everyone wants to know why we never mentioned what an accomplished daughter we have. And there it was, the real issue. Not that they'd failed to support me, but that they'd been publicly embarrassed by their failure. What are you telling them? I asked. I don't know what to say. I can't admit that we had no idea about your company. I can't admit that we thought you were unemployed. It makes us look like terrible parents. You are terrible parents.
At least when it comes to me. Emma? Mother, you're calling me because you're embarrassed, not because you're proud. You're worried about your social standing, not my happiness. Even now, even after learning about my success, you're making this about you. That's not true. Isn't it you just spent 5 minutes talking about how embarrassing this is for you, how you don't know what to tell your friends, how this affects your reputation? You haven't once said you're proud of what I've accomplished. Another silence. I am proud, she said finally, but the words sounded hollow. You're proud now that Victoria Chen has given you permission to be proud. But where was that pride when I graduated summa cum laude from culinary school? Where was it when I earned my MBA? Where was it when I landed my first major corporate client? I didn't know those things were important to you. Everything was important to me, Mother. My education, my career, my dreams, my happiness, all of it was important to me. But none of it was important to you, unless it served your immediate needs. I'm sorry, she whispered. Are you sorry you got caught? I'm sorry I failed you. The admission hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Too little, too late, but an admission nonetheless. I know you are Mother, but sorry doesn't undo 15 years of damage. Sorry doesn't give me back the confidence you chipped away at. Sorry doesn't compensate for all the times you made me feel invisible in my own family. What can I do? How can I fix this? I don't know if you can. I don't know if any of you can. The damage isn't just about not knowing about my business. It's about not knowing me. It's about 15 years of treating me like I was disposable, like my thoughts and feelings and dreams were less important than everyone else's. We didn't mean to make you feel that way. Intent doesn't matter, Mother. Impact does. And the impact of your treatment was that I learned to stop expecting anything from my family. I learned to build my life around people who actually value me. Emma, please, tell me what to do. Tell me how to be the mother you deserve. The question broke something inside me that I hadn't realized was still whole. Because part of me, the part that was still 8 years old and desperate for approval, wanted to believe she meant it. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if you can be that mother because I don't know if you're willing to do the work it would require. What work? The work of actually getting to know me, the work of examining why you treated me the way you did. The work of changing not just your words, but your fundamental assumptions about who I am and what I'm capable of. I can do that. Can you? Because it would mean admitting that you were wrong about me for 15 years. It would mean acknowledging that your treatment of me was cruel and damaging. It would mean taking responsibility for the fact that your daughter built an empire while living in your house and you never noticed because you never bothered to look. Silence. It would mean accepting that I don't need your approval anymore, that I don't need your support, that I don't need anything from you except basic respect and decency. Emma. And it would mean understanding that respect isn't something you can turn on and off based on whether my success is convenient for you. Respect is something you either have for someone or you don't. I do respect you. You respect the Forbes cover story. You respect the Pinnacle Corporation contract. You respect what Victoria Chen told you about my company. But do you respect me? Do you respect my judgment, my autonomy, my right to make my own choices without your approval? The question hung between us like a test she'd already failed. I want to, she said finally. Wanting to isn't enough, Mother. Either you do or you don't. How will I know if I do? You'll know because you'll stop making my success about you. You'll know because you'll be proud of me, even when it's not socially advantageous. You'll know because you'll support my decisions even when you don't understand them. I can try. Maybe you can. But trying isn't enough either. Either you change or you don't. Either you become the mother I needed 15 years ago or you don't. Either you earn back the right to be part of my life or you don't.
And if I don't, I looked out at the ocean again, at the infinite horizon that promised endless possibilities. Then you don't, I said simply. Then you continue being strangers who happen to share my DNA. Then you get to live with the knowledge that you had an extraordinary daughter and you chose not to see her until the rest of the world forced you to look. Emma, I love you. I know you think you do. But love isn't just a feeling, Mother. Love is action. Love is choosing to see and value and support the people you claim to care about. Love is putting their needs before your social standing. I can learn to do that. Maybe, but I'm not going to wait around to find out. I've spent 15 years waiting for you to see me, and I'm done waiting. From now on, you either choose to be part of my life or you don't. But I'm not going to make it easy for you. And I'm not going to pretend the past 15 years didn't happen. What does that mean? It means if you want a relationship with me, you're going to have to earn it. You're going to have to prove that you've actually changed, not just apologized. You're going to have to demonstrate that you value me as a person, not just as a reflection of your parenting success. How do I do that? I don't know, Mother. That's for you to figure out. But I'll give you a hint. It starts with actually knowing who I am, what I care about, what makes me happy, what I'm working toward. It starts with being genuinely interested in my life, instead of just how my life affects yours. I want to know those things. Then ask. But don't ask because you think it's what I want to hear. Ask because you actually care about the answers. I do care. We'll see. I hung up and turned off my phone again, settling back into my chair to watch the last of the evening light fade from the sky. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Emma Carter would become a public figure, a success story, a woman whose achievements could no longer be dismissed or ignored. But tonight, I was simply a daughter who had finally stopped waiting for her family to love her enough to see her. The waves continued their eternal rhythm against the shore, indifferent to human drama, constant. In their reminder that some things endure while others wash away like footprints in sand, I raised my glass to the darkening sky, toasting the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Whatever came next, it would be on my terms, built on my foundation, earned through my work. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The morning sun streaming through my hotel suite windows felt different, somehow brighter, more purposeful, like it was illuminating a stage where something momentous was about to unfold. I'd slept the deep, dreamless sleep of someone whose conscience was finally clear, and I woke with the kind of energy that comes from knowing your life is about to change forever. James Mitchell arrived at precisely 10 o'clock, accompanied by a photographer whose equipment could have stocked a small camera store. He was younger than I'd expected, with the kind of intense focus that marked the best journalists, someone who listened not just to what you said, but to what you didn't say. "Ms. Carter," he said, settling into the chair across from me in my suite's sitting area. "I have to say your story is unlike anything I've encountered in 15 years of covering entrepreneurs." "How so?" "Most successful business owners can't wait to tell their story.
They've got PR teams, marketing strategies, social media presences designed to maximize their visibility. You've done the opposite. You've built an empire in plain sight while remaining virtually invisible." The photographer began setting up his lights, transforming my hotel suite into a professional studio with remarkable efficiency. "Visibility isn't always an asset in the luxury event planning business," I said. "Many of our clients value discretion above almost everything else." "True, but there's discretion and then there's complete anonymity. Your company has no public-facing leadership page, no founder biography, minimal social media presence.
If not for Victoria Chen's LinkedIn post yesterday, the business world still wouldn't know who E. Carter actually is. And now they do. Now they do.
The question is, why now? What made you decide to step into the spotlight after years of carefully avoiding it?
I considered the question while the photographer adjusted his equipment. Why now? The honest answer was that I hadn't decided anything. Circumstances had decided for me. My family's spectacular failure on Christmas Day had forced a revelation I'd been content to postpone indefinitely. Sometimes the decision to become visible isn't really a decision at all, I said finally. Sometimes visibility is thrust upon you. By whom? By people who underestimate you so completely that they accidentally expose their own ignorance. James leaned forward, his journalist instincts clearly pinging. Can you elaborate on that? My family had no idea about my company's success. For 15 years, they assumed I was unemployed and struggling. Yesterday, they discovered they were wrong in the most public way possible. How public? They were hosting a Christmas dinner for 25 VIP guests, including Victoria Chen. They'd promised their guests that their daughter would cater the event. When I refused and flew to Miami instead, they ended up serving pizza to one of the most powerful women in corporate America. James's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Pizza, pizza, from Tony's down the street on Christmas Day to the CEO of Pinnacle Corporation. And Victoria Chen is the same person you were meeting with in Miami, the same person I was meeting with to sign a $2 million contract while my family was explaining to her why their unemployed daughter wasn't available to cook. The photographer paused his setup to stare at me. James set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. James shook his head. That's either the most ironic coincidence in business history or the most perfectly orchestrated revenge I've ever heard of. It wasn't orchestrated. It was just inevitable. Inevitable how, when you treat someone as invisible for long enough, you stop noticing what they're actually doing. My family saw what they expected to see a daughter who needed their support. They never looked closely enough to see what was actually there, which was a woman who'd built everything she needed without them. James picked up his pen again, scribbling notes with the intensity of someone who'd stumbled onto gold. Your assistant mentioned that your family's lack of understanding made your journey particularly challenging. Can you talk about that? The question hit deeper than I had expected.
How do you explain 15 years of casual dismissal to someone who'd probably never experienced it? How do you articulate the slow erosion of confidence that comes from having your achievements consistently minimized by the people who are supposed to love you most? Imagine, I said slowly, that every time you accomplish something significant, the people closest to you found a way to diminish it. Not maliciously necessarily, but consistently. Imagine that your successes were always attributed to luck, or dismissed as hobbies, or overshadowed by someone else's lesser achievements. That sounds incredibly isolating. It was, but it was also instructive. When you can't rely on external validation, you learn to rely on internal measures of success. When your family doesn't celebrate your victories, you learn to celebrate them yourself. When no one else believes in your vision, you become very clear about whether you believe in it. Did you ever consider telling them about your success? I tried early on, but after years of having my achievements dismissed, I realized something important. Their opinion of my work mattered less than the work itself. The photographer interrupted our conversation. Ms. Carter, I'd like to get some shots by the window if that's all right. The natural light is perfect right now. As I moved to the window, James continued his questions. Your company specializes in high-end corporate events. How did you identify that niche? During my MBA program, I noticed that most corporate event planning fell into two categories: cheap and uninspiring, or expensive and ostentatious. There was a gap in the market for events that were both sophisticated and authentic, that enhanced business relationships
rather than just demonstrating wealth. And your culinary background gave you an advantage in that space. Food is the universal language of hospitality. When you can create an exceptional dining experience, you're not just feeding people, you're creating a context for meaningful connections. The photographer directed me through a series of poses while James continued his questions. The process felt surreal. After years of carefully maintaining my anonymity, I was now being photographed for a national magazine cover. Tell me about the moment you realized your company had achieved genuine success, James said. 3 years ago, we were hired to cater a Fortune 500 board retreat. The CEO later told me it was the first board meeting in company history where directors actually looked forward to the meals. He said the quality of conversation improved dramatically when people weren't distracted by subpar food or service. That must have been gratifying. It was validation that our approach was working. But the real moment of realization came 6 months later when that same CEO recommended us to 4 other Fortune 500 companies, and they all booked us within a month. Word of mouth is powerful in the luxury market. It's everything. Our clients don't just hire us for events, they hire us because they trust us to represent their values and protect their relationships. James glanced at his notes. Speaking of relationships, I'm curious about the personal cost of building a business while managing family expectations that didn't align with your reality. The question hit like a physical blow. The personal cost? You've described 15 years of feeling invisible to your family while building a highly visible business. That must have created some internal conflict. I moved away from the window, needing space to think. The photographer continued shooting, but I was barely aware of him. The personal cost, I repeated slowly, was learning that love and understanding aren't the same thing. That being proud of someone and being proud to know someone aren't the same thing either. Can you elaborate? My family loves me. I don't doubt that. But they love the version of me that exists in their minds, not the person I actually am. They're proud of me now because my success reflects well on them, but they weren't proud of me when they thought I was struggling. That's a painful distinction. It is, but it's also clarifying. When someone's support is conditional on your success being visible to them, you learn not to depend on that support. My phone buzzed on the table. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and I answered it immediately. "Emma, I need to interrupt," she said without preamble. "We have a situation developing that you need to know about." "What kind of situation?" "Your sister is here." "Here in Miami. Here in the hotel lobby asking for your room number. She says it's urgent family business." I closed my eyes, feeling the peaceful morning dissolving around me. How did she even know where I was staying? She said she called every 5-star hotel in Miami until she found one that would confirm you were a guest. Apparently, she's very persistent when motivated. What does she want? She won't say, but she looks... Sarah paused, searching for the right words. She looks desperate, Emma, like someone whose world has collapsed. I looked at James and the photographer, both of whom were pretending not to listen to my conversation, but obviously hanging on every word. "Send her up," I said finally, "but give me 10 minutes first. Are you sure that's wise?" "Probably not, but I'm curious to see what's so urgent that she flew to Miami on Christmas morning." I hung up and turned to James. "I'm sorry, but I need to handle a family emergency. Can we pause the interview for a few minutes?" "Of course. Actually, this might be perfect timing. Would you be open to having your sister join us for part of the conversation? Family dynamics are such an important part of your story." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" Because Grace was about to walk into a room where I was being celebrated for achievements she'd spent 15 years dismissing. Because the last thing I needed was her performing familial support for a national magazine. Because some conversations were too raw, too real, too potentially destructive to happen in front of witnesses. Because some family conversations shouldn't be public, I said simply. "Fair enough. We'll step outside until you're ready to continue." After James and the photographer left, I stood at the window looking out at the ocean, trying to prepare myself for whatever catastrophe had driven Grace to fly from New York to Miami in the span of 12 hours. The knock on my door came exactly 10 minutes later. Grace looked like she hadn't slept. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, and her makeup couldn't quite hide the exhaustion around her eyes. She was carrying an overnight bag and what appeared to be a manila folder stuffed with papers. "Emma," she said, stepping into the suite without waiting for an invitation. "Thank God you're here. Where else would I be? And what are you doing here?" "Grace, how did you even get a flight on Christmas morning?" "Private jet. Dad's friend owns a charter company." She set down her bag and looked around the suite with the kind of appreciation that came from someone who understood luxury. "We need to talk. We talked yesterday, multiple times. Everything's changed since yesterday." "What's changed?" Grace pulled out her phone and started scrolling through what appeared to be social media posts. All of this. "Emma, do you have any idea what's happening back home?" "I assume people are talking about Victoria Chen's LinkedIn post." "People aren't just talking about it, it's gone viral, not just in business circles, but everywhere. Someone shared it on TikTok with a caption about family members who secretly become successful, and it's been viewed over 2 million times." She showed me her phone screen. The TikTok video was a screenshot of Victoria's LinkedIn post with overlaid text reading, "POV, you find out your unemployed family member is actually a multi-millionaire CEO." The comments section was endless, filled with people sharing their own stories of being underestimated by family. "It gets worse." Grace continued swiping to another post. Someone from the country club posted about the Christmas dinner disaster. They called it the Pizzagate scandal and tagged Mom, Dad, and me.
And the post was brutal in its casual cruelty. When you promise Victoria Chen a gourmet feast, but your daughter serves her pizza instead. Christmas disaster, social climbing, awkward. "Grace, I'm sorry that it gets worse," she interrupted, pulling out the manila folder. "These started arriving this morning." She spread papers across my coffee table, cancellation notices, angry emails, contract terminations. I recognized several letterheads from Grace's public relations clients. "Meridian Corp terminated my contract," she said, her voice cracking. "They said they couldn't work with someone who had such fundamental gaps in family awareness. Henderson Industries canceled their annual retainer. The Morrison Group pulled their account." I stared at the papers, feeling a mixture of shock and something that might have been guilt. "Grace, I never intended. I know you didn't."
"But, Emma, my entire business is built on relationships, on trust, on the assumption that I understand people and their motivations. How can I sell myself as a communications expert when I had no idea my own sister was running a multi-million-dollar company?" She sank into the chair. James had vacated, burying her face in her hands. "It's not just the business. Brad called off our engagement." "What?" He said if I was that oblivious about my own family, how could he trust me to be aware of what was happening in our relationship? She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. He said I clearly lived in a fantasy world where I was the center of everything, and he didn't want to marry someone so self-absorbed. The accusation was harsh, but not entirely unfair. Grace had always viewed the world through the lens of how it affected her, how it reflected on her, how it served her needs. "Grace, I'm sorry about Brad, but I deserve it," she said quietly. "I deserve all of it. Emma, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about how we treated you, and you were right. About everything." "Was I?" "I went through my phone last night looking at every conversation we've had over the past 5 years. Do you know how many times I asked you about your life, about what you were working on, what you were excited about, what your goals were? I waited. 0, not once. Every conversation was about me, my clients, my problems, my relationships, my plans. I treated you like—" She struggled for the words. like a supporting character in my own story. Grace, I'm not finished. I looked through our family photos too. Do you know how many pictures we have of your college graduation? Your culinary school graduation? Any of your achievements? How many? None. We have hundreds of pictures of my graduations, my awards, my achievements, but nothing of yours. It's like you were only worth photographing when you were serving food at our events. The truth of it hit like cold water. I'd noticed the disparity years ago, but had learned to stop caring, stop expecting, stop hoping for recognition. Why are you telling me this, Grace? Because I want to fix it, because I want to earn the right to call you my sister again, because I realized yesterday that I lost the most important person in my life through my own selfishness and blindness. You didn't lose me. Didn't I? Emma, when was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you shared good news with me first? When was the last time you turned to me for support or advice, or just companionship? I couldn't remember. I literally couldn't remember the last time I'd viewed Grace as someone I could confide in rather than someone I needed to manage. That's what I thought, she said, reading my silence correctly. I lost you years ago. I just didn't notice because I was too busy expecting you to always be available when I needed something. Grace, what do you want from me? I want to know how to fix this. I want to know what I need to do to become the sister you deserved all along. I don't know if you can. Why not? Because fixing this isn't just about changing your behavior going forward. It's about acknowledging that your behavior up until now was damaging. It's about understanding that the person you thought I was unemployed, struggling, dependent on family support never actually existed. I understand that now. Do you? Because understanding it intellectually and understanding it emotionally are different things. You're sitting here telling me you want to fix our relationship, but you're also telling me that losing your business and your fiancé is what motivated you to fly to Miami. Not concern for my feelings, not genuine remorse for 15 years of dismissal, but the fact that your world collapsed when mine was revealed. Grace flinched like I'd slapped her. That's not fair. Isn't it? If your business hadn't been affected, if Brad hadn't called off your engagement, if the country club wasn't gossiping about your family, would you be here right now? The question hung between us like a test she was already failing. I don't know, she admitted finally. I want to say yes, but I don't know. At least you're honest. Emma, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm asking for one anyway because the alternative is losing you forever, and I can't live with that. You've been living with it for years. You just didn't realize it because you never looked closely enough to see that I was already gone. I see it now. You see it now because it's affecting you.
You see it now because my success is inconvenient for your narrative. You see it now because ignoring me is no longer socially acceptable. That's not the only reason. Isn't it, Grace, be honest? Would you be here if my success hadn't caused problems for you? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the contract termination letters scattered across my coffee table.
I don't know, she said again. I want to believe I would be, but I can't be sure. And that terrifies me about who I've become. The admission was raw, honest, and more self-aware than anything I'd ever heard from her. It should terrify you, I said, because it means you've spent 15 years caring more about your image than your sister's happiness. How do I change that? I don't know if you can. Change like that fundamental change in how you see and value other people. It's not something you can just decide to do. It's something you have to want badly enough to do the hard work of examining every assumption you've made about what matters in life. I want to do that work. Do you? Or do you want the results of that work? Because Wanting to be a better sister isn't the same as being willing to confront the fact that you've been a terrible one. Grace winced again, but didn't argue. Tell me something, Grace. In all the conversations you've had about me over the years with friends with Brad, with business associates, how did you describe me? She started, then stopped. How did you describe me to Brad when you first started dating? What did you tell him about your family? I told him I had a sister who was still finding her way in life. Still finding her way. At 32, after 2 degrees and 10 years of running a successful business. I didn't know about the business because you never asked. What else did you tell him? I said you were living with our parents while you figured out your next steps. Living with our parents, not paying them rent for a private apartment, not running a business from a converted carriage house, but living with our parents like a dependent adult child. Emma, I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. Knowing would have complicated your narrative about being the successful daughter. Knowing would have required you to see me as an equal instead of a cautionary tale. Grace stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the same ocean view that had given me peace the night before. You're right, she said finally, about all of it. I turned you into a character in my story instead of recognizing that you had your own story. I made assumptions about your life because those assumptions made me feel better about mine. Why? Because, and she struggled with the words, because having a sister who was struggling made me feel more successful. By comparison, because being the daughter who had her life together was part of my identity. The honesty was brutal and necessary. And now I realized that the sister I thought was struggling was actually more successful than I ever dreamed of being. Now I realized that my entire sense of self was built on a foundation of lies I told myself about other people. Grace, what do you actually want from me? I want you to teach me how to be your sister. I want you to help me understand who you really are, what you care about, what makes you happy. I want to learn to value you for who you are instead of who I need you to be. That's a lot to ask from someone you've spent 15 years ignoring. I know, but I'm asking anyway because the alternative is accepting that I destroyed the most important relationship in my life through my own selfishness. You did destroy it, Grace. Whether you can rebuild it is a different question. How do I start? I looked at my sister, really looked at her for what felt like the first time in years. She was beautiful, successful, accomplished, and completely lost. She'd built her entire identity around being better than everyone else, and the revelation that she'd been wrong about me had shattered her foundation. You start by accepting that this isn't about you, I said. This isn't about your guilt or your embarrassment or your need to feel better about yourself. This is about whether you're capable of genuine interest in another person's life. I want to be capable of that. Wanting isn't enough. You have to prove it over time, through actions, not words. How? By asking me questions about my life and actually listening to the answers. By supporting my decisions even when you don't understand them. By celebrating my successes even when they don't benefit you. By treating me like a person whose thoughts and feelings matter as much as yours do. I can do that. Can you? Because it means giving up, being the center of attention. It means accepting that sometimes other people's needs come first. It means fundamentally changing how you interact with the world. Grace turned from the window to face me directly. Emma, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But I'm begging you for both because losing you completely would be the worst consequence of 15 years of terrible choices. The vulnerability in her voice was real raw and completely unfamiliar. I'd never seen Grace expose herself like this, never seen her admit to fundamental flaws in her character. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said honestly. And I'm not ready to trust that this change is permanent rather than just a reaction to crisis. I understand, but I'm willing to see if you can prove me wrong. How? Go home, Grace.
Fix your business or don't. That's not my concern. Figure out your relationship with Brad or don't. That's not my responsibility. But if you want a relationship with me, you're going to have to earn it slowly, honestly, and without expecting immediate results. What does that look like? It looks like you learning who I actually am. It looks like you developing genuine interest in my life beyond how it affects yours. It looks like you supporting me in ways that don't require public recognition. I want to do all of that. Then do it. But don't expect me to make it easy for you, and don't expect me to pretend the past 15 years didn't happen. Grace nodded, picking up her overnight bag. Thank you for giving me a chance. I'm not giving you a chance, Grace. I'm giving you an opportunity to earn one. Whether you can actually do it remains to be seen. After she left, I sat alone in my suite for several minutes processing the conversation.
Grace's vulnerability had been genuine, but vulnerability born from consequences wasn't the same as vulnerability born from genuine remorse. Time would tell which one this had been. A knock on my door announced James's return. The Forbes interview was far from over, and I had a story to finish telling. But as I prepared to continue sharing my journey with the business world, I couldn't shake the feeling that the most important part of my story was still being written. James returned with the photographer, both of them tactfully avoiding any questions about Grace's visit. We settled back into our interview positions, but something had shifted in the energy of the room. Grace's raw vulnerability had cracked something open inside me, and I found myself more willing to explore the deeper implications of my story. Where were we? James asked, consulting his notes. The personal cost of building a business while managing family expectations. Right. I'm curious about something. Your sister's unexpected visit suggests this story is still evolving. How does it feel to have your family's perception of you change so dramatically and so publicly? And I considered the question while the photographer resumed shooting. Surreal. For 15 years, I've been Emma, the family disappointment. Now, suddenly, I'm Emma, the secret success story. But neither version is really accurate. What would be accurate? That I'm just Emma. I've always been just Emma.
The only thing that's changed is their willingness to see me clearly. That must be both validating and frustrating. It is, because their newfound respect isn't really about me, it's about external validation of my worth. Victoria Chen's endorsement, the Forbes cover story, the business metrics they can point to. They're not proud of who I am, they're proud of who they've learned I am. Is there a difference? All the difference in the world. Pride based on discovery isn't the same as pride based on understanding. If Victoria Chen had never posted about our meeting, if Forbes had never called, if my success had remained invisible to them, would they be treating me any differently today? What do you think? I think they'd still be expecting me to cook for their next dinner party. James laughed, but there was something thoughtful in his expression. You've built something remarkable while dealing with that dynamic.
What kept you motivated during the difficult periods? The work itself, when you love what you do, when you're genuinely passionate about creating exceptional experiences, happiness for people, external validation becomes less important. My clients' satisfaction, my team's growth, my own sense of accomplishment, those things sustained me. Tell me about your team. How did you build such a strong organization while maintaining such personal anonymity? I hired people who were passionate about excellence rather than recognition. We created a culture where the work speaks for itself, where success is measured by client satisfaction rather than media coverage. That's unusual in today's business environment. Maybe, but it's also effective. When your team knows they're valued for their contributions rather than their ability to generate publicity, they focus on what actually matters.
The photographer asked me to move to different positions around the suite while James continued his questions. The process felt increasingly natural, like I was finally stepping into a version of myself I'd been hiding for years. Your company specializes in discretion, but you're about to become very public. How do you balance those competing needs? Carefully. The cover story changes my public profile, but it doesn't change our commitment to client confidentiality. If anything, it reinforces our brand promise. We're sophisticated enough to work with the most demanding clients, experienced enough to handle complex logistics, and professional enough to keep our mouths shut about what happens behind closed doors. Speaking of behind closed doors, I understand your next major event is quite significant. The Pinnacle contract launches with their annual shareholders meeting in February. 800 attendees, 3 days of programming, everything from intimate board dinners to large-scale presentations. No pressure. I thrive on pressure. It's when people expect you to fail that you discover what you're truly capable of. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Major development. Victoria Chen just announced the Pinnacle partnership on CNBC. Stock prices are up, and we're getting calls from every major corporation on the East Coast. I showed the message to James, who read it with growing excitement. This is happening in real time, he said. Your story is literally unfolding as we speak. It feels that way. How does it feel to go from invisible to unavoidable in the span of 48 hours? Overwhelming, exciting, terrifying. Like I'm finally stepping into a spotlight I've been avoiding for years. Why were you avoiding it? The question struck deeper than I'd expected. Why had I been avoiding recognition? Why had I been content to remain anonymous even as my company grew and succeeded? Because spotlights attract attention, and attention invites judgment. As long as I remained invisible, I could control the narrative about my success. I could focus on the work without worrying about whether people thought I deserved the opportunities I'd created. And now I'm discovering that hiding your success is just another form of self-doubt. By refusing recognition, I was inadvertently validating my family's assumption that I wasn't worth recognizing. That's a powerful realization. It is. And it's why this interview, this cover story, this moment feels so important. It's not just about business success. It's about claiming the space I've earned in the world. James scribbled more notes, clearly energized by the direction our conversation was taking. Let's talk about what comes next. You've signed a major contract. You're about to become a public figure, and your family dynamics are shifting dramatically. What does the future look like for Emma Carter? Bright. For the first time in years, I feel like I can see clearly. I know who I am, what I'm capable of, and what I want to build. I have a team that believes in our vision clients, who trust our capabilities and opportunities that seemed impossible just a few months ago. And personally, I'm learning to set boundaries. I'm learning that love without respect isn't actually love. I'm learning that success means nothing if you're not allowed to enjoy it. What would you say to other entrepreneurs who might be struggling with similar family dynamics? That your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see it? That building something meaningful requires you to believe in yourself even when the people closest to you don't. That sometimes the most important validation comes from within. Any regrets about how things unfolded? I thought about Grace's tears, Mother's desperation, Dad's confusion. I thought about 15 years of missed opportunities for genuine connection, of conversations that never happened, of support that was never offered. I regret that it took a crisis for my family to see me clearly. I regret that their recognition came with such public humiliation. But I don't regret finally standing up for myself, and I don't regret refusing to continue being invisible. What's next for Stellar Events?
Expansion. The Pinnacle contract opens doors to national clients we've been targeting for years. We're looking at opening offices in Los Angeles and Chicago, possibly London, if the international opportunities develop as expected. And what's next for Emma Carter personally? Learning to be publicly successful after years of being privately successful. Learning to navigate family relationships that are fundamentally changing. Learning to accept recognition for achievements I've been downplaying for years. The photographer announced that he had everything he needed and began packing his equipment with the same efficiency he'd shown setting it up. James continued asking questions while the lights came down, clearly reluctant to end our conversation. "One final question," he said. "If you could go back and change how you handled your family relationships over the past 15 years, would you?" I looked out at the Miami skyline, thinking about all the paths not taken, all the conversations that might have happened differently, all the ways this story could have unfolded. "No," I said finally, because changing how I handled them would have required them to be different people than they actually were. I spent 15 years hoping they would see me, support me, value me without external pressure to do so. They didn't.
And that taught me something valuable about relying on myself, about building my own foundation, about creating my own definition of success. No bitterness, less than you might expect. Bitterness requires ongoing investment in disappointment. I'm more interested in investing in possibility. After James and the photographer left, I sat alone in my suite, processing everything that had happened in the past 2 days. My phone was buzzing constantly with notifications, client calls, interview requests, congratulations from business associates who'd seen Victoria's posts or heard about the Forbes story. Sarah had sent a detailed email outlining the immediate opportunities the publicity was creating. 3 Fortune 500 companies wanted to discuss exclusive contracts. 2 major magazines wanted to feature stellar events in upcoming issues. A television producer was interested in developing a show about luxury event planning.
But the most interesting message came from an unexpected source, Victoria Chen herself. "Emma," the text read, "I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly. I wanted you to know that what happened at your family's dinner actually reinforced my decision to partner with you. Anyone who can build what you've built while dealing with that level of dismissal has exactly the kind of resilience and determination Pinnacle values. Looking forward to a long and successful partnership." I stared at the message for several minutes, marveling at the irony. My family's attempt to use my services without my consent had accidentally provided the best possible endorsement of my character and capabilities. My phone rang. Mother's name appeared on the screen. "Emma," she said, and her voice sounded different, smaller, less certain than I'd ever heard it. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I needed to apologize." "For what specifically?" "For everything. For 15 years of not seeing you. For taking you for granted. For assuming your availability without respecting your autonomy. For," her voice broke, "for failing you as a mother." "Mother." "No, let me finish. I've been thinking about what you said about love being action rather than just feeling. You were right. I loved the idea of you, but I didn't love you enough to actually know you." "What changed?" "Victoria Chen. After you hung up yesterday, she stayed for another hour. She didn't just tell us about your business. She told us about you, about your professionalism, your creativity, your ability to solve impossible problems under extreme pressure. She described someone I didn't recognize, someone I should have known better than anyone. And I realized that the daughter I thought I knew was a fiction I'd created to make myself feel better about my own failures as a parent. The admission hung between us like a bridge. I wasn't sure I was ready to cross. "Emma!" I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed 15 years of opportunities to be the mother you needed. But I'm asking, begging for a chance to learn how to be the mother you deserve. What does that look like, Mother? I don't know. That's the honest answer. I don't know how to undo 15 years of damage. I don't know how to prove that my change is real rather than just reactive. I don't know how to earn back the right to be part of your life. At least you're being honest about not knowing. It's all I have left. Honesty and hope that it's not too late to start over. Mother, starting over isn't just about changing your behavior going forward. It's about acknowledging the impact your previous behavior had on me. I'm trying to understand that impact. Because understanding it means accepting that you contributed to 15 years of self-doubt, isolation, and feeling invisible in my own family. It means accepting that your treatment of me was damaging, even if it wasn't intentionally malicious. I accept that. God help me, I accept that I damaged my own daughter through ignorance and selfishness. The pain in her voice was real, raw, and completely unfamiliar. Emma, what would it take for you to give me a chance to be better? I don't know, Mother. I honestly don't know if you can be better. Change at your age, change that fundamental. It's incredibly difficult. I have to try. The alternative is losing you forever, and I can't live with that. You've been living with it for years. You just didn't realize it. I realize it now, and it's unbearable. I looked out at the ocean, at the endless horizon that had brought me peace for the past 2 days, and tried to imagine a future where my family relationships weren't sources of disappointment. Mother, if you're serious about change, you need to understand something. This isn't about you feeling better about yourself. This isn't about assuaging your guilt or maintaining your social standing. This is about whether you're capable of genuine interest in another person's happiness. I want to be capable of that. Wanting isn't enough. You have to prove it, over time, through actions that don't benefit you. How? By learning who I actually am, by supporting my decisions even when you don't understand them, by celebrating my successes even when they don't reflect well on you, by treating me like an autonomous adult whose thoughts and feelings matter as much as yours do. I can do that. Can you? Because it means giving up control. It means accepting that I don't need your approval or your advice or your management. It means fundamentally changing how you see our relationship. I'm willing to change everything if it means not losing you completely. We'll see, Mother. Talk is easy. Change is hard. I know, but I have to try. After we hung up, I ordered room service and settled onto my balcony to watch the sunset. 3 conversations with family members. In 2 days, each one revealing different layers of damage and different possibilities for repair. Grace's crisis-driven vulnerability, Mother's guilt-driven desperation, Dad's confusion at having his assumptions shattered. None of it felt like genuine change yet, but all of it felt like the beginning of something different. My phone buzzed with a call from Sarah. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Surprisingly well. Tired, but well?" "Good, because tomorrow is going to be intense. The Forbes story hits newsstands in the morning, and I've already had 15 interview requests. Also, Victoria Chen wants to accelerate the timeline on the shareholders' meeting. She wants to announce the partnership as soon as possible." "How accelerated? 3 weeks instead of 6. Can we handle it?" "We can handle anything. That's what we do." That's what I told her. "Oh, and Emma, I'm proud of you. I know this whole family situation has been difficult, but watching you handle it with such grace and strength, it's been inspiring." "Thank you, Sarah, for everything. I couldn't have built any of this without you." "Yes, you could have. You just would have been more stressed doing it." After we hung up, I sat alone with my thoughts as Miami settled into evening around me. Tomorrow, Emma Carter would be on the cover of Forbes magazine. Tomorrow, the business world would know that the invisible woman had been visible all along. They just hadn't been looking carefully enough to see her. 3 months later, I stood in the ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in New York, overseeing the final preparations for what would become known as the most successful shareholders meeting in Pinnacle Corporation's history. 800 guests, flawless service and coverage in every major business publication in the country. Victoria Chen found me, during the cocktail hour, looking elegant in a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Emma," she said, "I wanted to thank you personally. This event has exceeded every expectation I had." "It's been our pleasure. I also wanted you to know that the board voted unanimously to extend our partnership for an additional 3 years. The contract renewal includes a significant increase in scope and compensation." "That's wonderful news." "There's something else," Victoria said, glancing around the room to ensure we weren't overheard. "Your family is here tonight." I followed her gaze across the ballroom to where Mother, Dad, and Grace stood near the windows overlooking Central Park. They looked elegant, successful, exactly like the kind of people who belonged at an event like this, but they also looked uncertain, like they weren't sure they had the right to be there. "I invited them," Victoria continued. "I thought it was time they saw you in your element, commanding a room full of the most powerful people in American business. How do they look? Proud, nervous, like they're seeing you for the first time." I watched my family from across the room, noting how they seemed to be trying to stay inconspicuous, how they kept glancing in my direction with expressions I had never seen before, something that looked like genuine admiration. "Emma," Victoria said, "I know family relationships are complicated, but watching you handle everything that happened last Christmas, the grace under pressure, the refusal to be diminished by other people's limitations, it told me everything I needed to know about your character." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You built all of this. You earned every bit of recognition you're receiving. And whether your family recognizes it or not, you're exactly where you belong." As Victoria moved away to mingle with other guests, I remained where I was watching the party I'd created unfold around me. My team moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency, anticipating needs before they were expressed, solving problems before they became visible. Everything was perfect, because we'd made it perfect. Grace appeared at my elbow looking stunning in an emerald green dress that complemented her eyes. "Emma," she said quietly, "this is incredible. I've been to a lot of corporate events, but nothing like this. Thank you. I've been watching you work tonight, and I finally understand what you meant about seeing you clearly. You're not just running this event, you're orchestrating it like a symphony conductor. It's what I do. It's who you are, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of the performative enthusiasm I'd grown accustomed to over the years. But what I saw instead was genuine amazement, real recognition of competence she'd never acknowledged before. "Grace, how are things with your business?" "Better, rebuilding, but better. It turns out that being publicly humbled can be a valuable learning experience. Some of my clients came back when they saw how I was handling the crisis." "And Brad, still gone. But honestly, you were right about him too. If he couldn't handle being wrong about you, he probably couldn't handle being wrong about anything important." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Losing him was painful, but losing you would have been devastating." Mother approached us, looking elegant in a navy silk dress that made her look younger than her years. "Emma dear," she said, and the endearment sounded natural this time, "I wanted to congratulate you on tonight's success. Everything is absolutely perfect." "Thank you, Mother. Victoria Chen told me that Pinnacle is expanding their partnership with your company." "She said you're being considered for their international events as well." "We are. I'm proud of you.
she said simply. I know I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of who you are, what you've built, and how you've handled everything that's happened. I appreciate that. Emma, I know I failed you for 15 years. I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough to undo that damage. But I want you to know that I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to learn how to be the mother you deserved all along. How's that going? Slowly, difficultly, but I'm committed to it because losing you completely isn't an option I can live with. Dad joined our small circle, looking distinguished in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Emma, he said, extending his hand for a formal handshake, congratulations on a magnificent evening. I shook his hand, noting the genuine respect in his grip. Thank you, Dad. I owe you an apology, he said, a significant one.
I spent 15 years underestimating someone who was actually more successful than I ever imagined possible. Dad, no, let me say this. I was wrong about you. Completely, fundamentally wrong. And I'm sorry for every time I dismissed your achievements, every time I suggested you needed to be more realistic about your goals, every time I treated you like you were failing when you were actually succeeding beyond my wildest expectations. The apology was formal, stilted, but absolutely sincere. I appreciate that. I know apologies don't undo damage. I know I can't give you back 15 years of feeling unsupported by your own father. But I want you to know that I see you now. I see who you really are, what you've accomplished, and how extraordinary you've become despite my failure to recognize it. Thank you. Emma, he said, his voice dropping to something more intimate. I know I don't have the right to ask for another chance,
but I'm asking anyway, because the alternative is accepting that I lost my daughter through my own blindness and arrogance. I looked around the ballroom at the event I had created, at the successful business I had built, at the life I had constructed entirely on my own terms. Then I looked at my family, 3 people who'd spent 15 years not seeing me and were now asking for the chance to learn how. I'm not ready to forget 15 years of feeling invisible, I said honestly, and I'm not ready to trust that this change is permanent rather than just a reaction to being publicly embarrassed. All 3 of them nodded, accepting the boundary I was setting. But, I continued, I'm willing to see if you can prove me wrong. I'm willing to let you try to earn back the right to be part of my life. What does that look like? Grace asked. It looks like you genuinely getting to know me. It looks like you supporting my decisions even when you don't understand them. It looks like you treating me like an equal rather than a project to be managed. We can do that, Mother said. Can you? Because it means giving up the assumption that you know what's best for me. It means accepting that I don't need your approval or your advice unless I ask for it. It means fundamentally changing how you see our relationships. We want to change, Dad said. Wanting isn't enough. You have to prove it, over time, through actions that don't benefit you. How long? Grace asked. As long as it takes. There's no timeline for earning back 15 years of trust. There's no guarantee that you'll be successful. But if you're genuinely committed to change, if you're willing to do the work of becoming the family I needed you to be, then we'll see what's possible. The conversation was interrupted by Sarah, who appeared at my side with a kind of purposeful energy that meant something important was happening. Emma, I hate to interrupt, but we have a situation that needs your attention. What kind of situation? The good kind. The mayor's office just called. They want to discuss having Stellar Events handle the city's upcoming International Business Summit. 800 delegates from 60 countries. I looked at my family at the ballroom full of successful people, celebrating a perfect evening at the life I'd built brick by brick while they weren't paying attention. Tell them yes, I said. We can handle anything. As Sarah walked away to confirm the booking, I turned back to my family. This is who I am, I said simply. This is what I do. This is the life I've built. If you want to be part of it, you're welcome to try, but you're joining my world now, not the other way around. Mother nodded. We understand. Do you? Because my world moves fast. My decisions are final. My time is valuable. My success is not up for debate. We understand, Dad repeated. Good.
I looked around the ballroom one more time, taking in the perfect culmination of years of hard work and careful planning. Because I'm just getting started. The evening ended with standing ovations, glowing reviews, and a contract renewal that would establish Stellar Events as one of the premier luxury event planning companies in the world. My family watched from the sidelines as I accepted congratulations from some of the most powerful people in American business, finally seeing me as I'd always been successful, competent, and absolutely unstoppable. As the last guests filed out of the Plaza Ballroom, I stood alone in the center of the empty space, surrounded by the remnants of another perfect event. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, new opportunities, new mountains to climb. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged, in the spotlight I'd finally learned to embrace, commanding the respect I'd always deserved, surrounded by the success I'd built entirely on my own terms. Success I had learned doesn't need permission, and respect isn't negotiable. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply becoming impossible to ignore. I raised an imaginary glass to the empty ballroom, toasting the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. To visibility, I whispered to the silence, and to never dimming your light for anyone again. The applause in my head was thunderous,